Hello kids, why don't you wrap your brains around this one? The camera was invented in 1888. That was 133 years ago. If you could go back in time and explain the concept of Instagram to the inventor, how do you think it would go? Do you think the inventor of the camera would understand the concept of a picture app on a cellular phone? Remember, you are 133 years in the future. How about this? In 1543, Nicholas Copernicus detailed his radical theory of the universe, in which the Earth, along with the other planets, rotated around the sun. His theory took more than a century to become widely accepted. Apparently, before this revelation, some of the smartest critical thinking minds on this planet were under the impression that the universe rotated around the Earth. Lastly, let's consider this. Perhaps the overreaching medical advance of the 19th century, well, at least certainly the most spectacular, was the conclusive demonstration that certain diseases, as well as the infection of surgical wounds, were directly caused by minute living organisms. Bacteria is discovered. This discovery changed the whole face of pathology and effected a complete revolution in the practice of surgery. Taking all of this, what I just told you, into account, it seems to me that there were plenty of things mankind thought it knew, but didn't really know at all. I have no doubt that even in this present day, there are still many things we think we know, but we really have no idea. The best advice I had ever received in my life told me to consider for a moment that everything you think you know might be wrong. Profound advice, is it not? For this particular episode of this particular podcast, for it to be absorbed, I would like everyone to consider for a moment that everything you guys might think you know might be wrong. Let's go! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dudes and dudettes, the sexy and the not so sexy, big children and little. Welcome to the information era, where everyone on the streets has a computer in their pocket, but nobody really knows shit.
Let's think this through.
Let's think this through.
Let's think this through.
Welcome to episode 7 of Let's Think This Through, a podcast platform that uses a scientific method as a frame, a template, a guide, if you will. This framework will provide structure when this podcast artistically examines certain aspects of the current human condition. Now, all things considered, please note that even though the structure of this podcast is framed scientifically, the conclusions reached will be expressed artistically. There are many different variations of the so-called scientific method. Some have 4 steps, some have 5, 6, and 7. The scientific method, which best suits the artistic vision of this podcast, is as follows. First, we will make an observation. Then we will ask a question based on the observation. Then we will form a hypothesis that answers the question. Then we will make a prediction based on the hypothesis. This will be followed by an experiment. Now, ideally, experiments are held in controlled environments. The controlled environment makes sure that all of the variables are controlled. Houston, we have a problem. I am not a scientist. I'm an artist. So experiments for the sake of this podcast will instead be experience. We will either be examining my own personal experience or historical events that society at large experienced. On some level, the experiences chosen will be ones that best puts the topic of the podcast in proper context. Finally, we will analyze the data, meaning we will briefly review and reflect on the discussion at hand as we approach the conclusion of the podcast. After every idea has been expressed and every thought has been communicated, the last step of this process is left up to you. You can either accept my wisdom and my testimony as I have presented it to you, or you can reject it and tell me to kick rocks. Either one you choose is fine and makes no difference to me. The reason it makes no difference to me is not because I'm a heartless bastard who doesn't care about your feelings and opinions. It makes no difference to me because you agreeing or disagreeing with my artistic perspective is irrelevant. What is actually relevant is your brain thinking critically. Critical thinking is a good thing. Now that the train tracks are laid, let us hop aboard and journey to our first destination, which is making the observation. Now, in my years on this planet, I have noticed that it is very difficult to try and persuade those who are already convinced. For example, science has proven that there is no correlation between skin color and personality, or skin color and temperament, or skin color and physical dexterity. To add to that, we have real life examples. We have a half Asian, half Black American becoming one of the greatest golf athletes of our time. One of the top 10 greatest rappers of all time is a white guy. Yao Ming can be a dominant 7-foot center in the NBA. And two black sisters from Compton can dominate professional tennis. Okay? Yet still, most folks will attribute cultural differences to skin color, as if the skin color itself is the influence of those differences. Meanwhile, in the realm of romance, less people are getting married. Less people are staying married. More people are having children out of wedlock, even though statistically, children have a greater chance for success in life when they are raised in a 2-parent household. More men are walking away from the dating market altogether. Many women are saying that they are the prize and men need to step up. And more men are saying women are delusional and they aren't worth the effort, and that marriage is a bad business deal anyway. All the while, not many are saying, how can we come together and fix this? It would seem that the Western world is overworked, underpaid, and only concerned with views and likes on social media platforms. Which brings me to the question. As a society, have we already been programmed? Let me let that marinate for a second. I'll ask it again. As a society, have we already been programmed? Now, of course, every single individual within the sound of my voice will absolutely say, not me, and that's okay. I'm not here to debate anyone's degree of self-awareness. For all I know, you may indeed be as woke can be. You may indeed be completely unplugged from the matrix. You may indeed be doing more reading of books than watching television media. You may already be the type of person who takes the time to heal those in pain. And you are aware when you yourself isn't standing firmly on your square. Hell, for all I know, you are not only a wise teacher, but you're also a great listener. You eat less, exercise more. You're a hell of a focused and spiritually present. Really? If that is indeed the space you are in, that's fantastic. For the rest of us who could use some self-improvement, I bring your attention to the hypothesis that answers the question. What was that question again? Oh yeah, as a society, have we already been programmed? The hypothesis and the answer to the question is yes. There's no doubt in my mind that not only are we programmed, but we are continually studied, examined, monitored, shamed, medicated, and course corrected into compliance. The algorithm is all around you, Neo. This programming starts at a very early age. But please don't take my word for it. Let's take a trip down memory lane, shall we? Experiment time! In previous episodes, I would rely heavily on personal experience instead of any experiment in a controlled environment simply because I'm not a scientist. That changes today. I will be referencing Jane Elliott's brown-eyed, blue-eyed experiment for episode 7. Sidebar, I had the pleasure of meeting and filming Jane Elliott for this channel. The link will be in the description. I implore you to check it out. She had a whole bunch to say. But to give you some background on her, I'll give you a little bit of background on how the experiment came to be, and then I will give you the experiment itself. Okay? On the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered in April of 1968, Jane Elliott's third graders from the small, all-white town of Riceville, Iowa, came to class confused and upset. They recently had made Dr. King their hero of the month, and they couldn't understand why someone would kill him. So Elliott decided to teach her class a daring lesson in the meaning of discrimination. She wanted to show her pupils what discrimination feels like and what it can do to people. So Elliott divided her class by eye color. Those with blue eyes and those with the brown eyes. On the first day, the blue-eyed children were told they were smarter, nicer, neater, and better than those with brown eyes. Throughout the day, Elliott praised them and allowed them privileges, such as taking longer recess and being first in the lunch line. Wow. In contrast, the brown-eyed children had to wear collars around their necks, and their behavior and performance were criticized and ridiculed by Elliott. On the second day, the roles were reversed, and the blue-eyed children were made to feel inferior while the brown eyes were designated the dominant group. What happened over the course of the unique 2-day exercise astonished both the students and teacher. On both days, children who were designated as inferior took on the look and behavior of genuinely inferior students, performing poorly on tests and other work. In contrast, the superior students, who had been sweet and tolerant before the exercise, became like mean-spirited and seemed to like discriminating against the inferior group. I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in the space of 15 minutes, says Elliott. She says she realized then that she had created a microcosm of society in a third grade classroom. Sidebar. When I was talking in the beginning, it was for this purpose right here. And the purpose is anytime you talk about people maybe not knowing everything they think they know, and you suggest that society is we're being herded, we're being persuaded, manipulated, propagated into doing certain things that the people in power want us to do. Anytime you start talking as if we are a population that are being led like sheep, people agree with that conceptually, but arrogantly, people think that they are the one exception, that they are not somebody who goes along with the herd. Some people on the low may be like, I kind of live in my own little bubble and that's all I care about. But they will not confess to being a sheep of sorts. That's why I said at the top of this freaking podcast, like, hey, you may want to consider everything you know might be wrong. Maybe some of what you know is wrong. Maybe a small bit of what you know is wrong. But let's not be all arrogant and think everybody within the sound of my voice has it all figured out. Consequently, I gave those other examples at the top of the show to point out that mankind has had some pretty daggone false notions from the gate. We didn't even know there was bacteria until about 133 years ago. Hell, the camera was just invented back then. It's crazy. People really thought that the whole universe circled around the earth. It makes sense that why people would think that. I mean, your point of reference is the earth. We're all on the earth and it really doesn't feel like it's spinning now, does it? However, the majority of people didn't even think that. So let's not get all 2021 and be all arrogant like, we know what's going on. That's why I said what I said. So, in analyzing the data, looking at everything, it doesn't seem very hard for the powers in place to teach us to hate ourselves and simultaneously teach us to love their wealth. What better way to distract us? We're down here fighting over crumbs while they stuff the pie in their fat mouths. Remember, kids, the only way for a minority to control a majority is through division. It's really that simple. Before I get out of here, gave you a lot, right? But before I get out of here, I will probably elaborate on this topic a bit more, especially I will be expressing myself in a way and I'll be saying a lot of raw-ish that I really just can't say on YouTube. So my thoughts, where I just speak candidly and I don't go by any written material or anything like that, there will always be an episode of Just My Thoughts on my Patreon account that coincides with the episode of Let's Think This Through. So I started doing this with episode 6, the episode right before this, and I thought it would be a cool thing. Do you need to watch Just My Thoughts to understand this podcast? No, you do not. But if you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, then that may be of some interest to you. I will also leave the link of my Patreon in the description. Be a great way to support this art if you believe that this art is of value. I think it is. But I'm biased. That's it for episode 7. Until next time, kids, take care of yourself.